Hey guys, Swim here from Top Deck, and today I'll be walking you through some of the basic strategy in Gwent. Now, there is a ton of depth to this game, but today we're just going to be covering the fundamentals that will help you perform better immediately. We're going to be focusing on the single most powerful and game dictating play you can make in your games. It's every faction's ultimate move. It can not only kill any unit or clear any hazard, but it can swing even the worst looking games in your favor. That's right, we're going to be focusing on the pass. A lot of players, when new to Gwent, know that it is a game about losing a battle to win a war, but don't know exactly how they should be aiming to go about doing that precisely. For example, what order to best play their cards in, and when to be looking for a pass. In this video, I'm not only going to help you with when to pass, but the best ways to think about what order you should be playing your cards in, and really help you understand the real objectives of the early game. Let's get into it. Now, a large part of Gwent revolves around round 1. It is the most dynamic round in Gwent because it's the only round where both players have the option of passing to give up the round at any point. So you have a situation where both players are simultaneously trying to find a good pass while blocking the opponent out of getting a good pass for them. Now, Gwent, of course, is a game, as all are, about resource management, and cards in hand are by far the most important resource, since cards in hand are available for any of the 3 rounds, unlike cards that have already been committed onto the board into any specific round. Because of this, it is incredibly important to keep track of these 2 numbers on the interface, which will show the number of cards in each player's hand, including leaders. I'd recommend keeping an eye on these at all times. The reason this is important is because it'll actually dictate the objectives you play for at any given time. So let me go ahead and explain that. If there's one thing to take away from this video, it's this. The objective, the real objective of round 1 is to win it by committing at most 1 more card than your opponent did. So, for example, if you win round 1 and you have 7 cards left and your opponent has 8, you're in a pretty good position. But beyond that, if you can do one of 2 things, you can secure a fantastic position. These 2 things are either win the round on even cards, so for example if you win the round and you both have 8 cards, or lose the round, i.e. give up the round, but with 2 cards in hand more than your opponent. If you can secure one of those 2 conditions, you will likely have secured the game at that point. That is a phenomenal advantage to get so early. And it's really important to understand these are the main objectives that dictate what a good pass can be and what good supporting plays for that pass also are. So this is really how you want to start thinking about the basic and fundamental strategy in Gwent. The idea is you want to set up a good round 3 state with a good pass, and you want to set up a good pass opportunity by choosing key cards in your hand at the right moments to try to engineer that, while simultaneously blocking the opponent out of a good passing opportunity for them. And I'm going to give you guys an example of that. So let's have a look at this clip right here. My opponent, a Nilfgaard player, is going to go ahead and open with a relatively slow play right off the bat. This is the Emissary into triple Alba Pikeman play. I'm going to go ahead and respond, since I'm playing Skellige in this game, with a very high speed play that the Skellige starter deck has access to. This is the Hjalmar into Roach play. Now Hjalmar, when it comes out, doesn't represent too many points immediately because it summons a unit on your opponent's side, and it's only when this unit dies that Hjalmar's real ability activates, giving him plus 10 extra points. So it ends up being, if you can kill the unit in 1 or 2 turns, one of the fastest way to play points onto the board that any starter deck has access to. My opponent is going to respond with a black infantry arbalist, and I'm going to be responding in turn with another very high point play, effectively killing the Lord of Unvik that the Hjalmar spawned. This is going to really surge me ahead in points. Now, take a look. It is very important to look very closely at the number of cards in each player's hand throughout this exchange, and consider each player's pass opportunities at any given moment. My opponent went first with a slow 7-point play, because the emissary is 2 points for me, and I immediately got ahead of them in points with Hjalmar. So right off the bat, I am blocking the opponent's pass opportunity, because keep in mind, the opponent does not want to lose this round on even cards. So they know if they pass, I will just pass as well. So then they play something else, and I go a step further than staying ahead of them. I kill the Lord of Unvik, surging ahead by them by so many points that no matter what they play, they will not be able to get ahead of me on their turn, which gives me the opportunity at a pass that forces them 2 cards down, because of course at that point they will have to play an additional card after my pass, and we'll go into the next round with me having 2 more cards than my opponent. This is a really good condition you can play for. A fantastic rule of thumb in Gwent is that whenever possible, if you are able to take a pass that forces the opponent to have 2 less cards than you, sometimes this will involve predicting what they have in their hand, whether they can make a certain number of points in one turn. But if you can do this, successfully predict, I would almost always recommend trying to go for this, as if they have 2 less cards than you in round 2, you guarantee yourself a great round 3 setup. So one of the concepts most crucial in trying to set up but also block these passes in a round 1 scenario is the speed at which you can play points out per turn. There's some cards in Gwent that give you a lot of points very quickly, and there's some cards in Gwent that generate a ton of value but do it in a slower way. For example, something like a Dagon summoning a fog will often represent a high point value, but it will take a long period of time to achieve those points because you don't get your value immediately, so it has less of an impact in terms of setting up a pass or blocking an opponent's pass. That's kind of the trade-off you get with slow cards that give more points overall. When you see your opponent making these kinds of slow plays, these setup plays that give them value over time but not very fast value, you can take in most situations the opportunity to play a very fast play, which will potentially engineer a great pass for you, which is exactly what I have done in this last clip. Be very mindful yourself of playing these like low speed setup plays, because of course then the opponent may have a good pass opportunity on you. And I gotta say, when I was a new player trying to take all this in, I found it very counterintuitive, because even though I've been playing card games for a very long time, the concepts of round play and passing are so unique to Gwent that I think it's very important to make sure you are thinking about them in the most effective way. How I would recommend doing that is to basically imagine that the round that you give up is given to you as a resource at the start of a game. Let me explain exactly what I mean by that. So, because each player only needs to win 2 rounds in Gwent, that means that each player is effectively given 1 round that they can choose at any point to pass and give up. This is basically your wild card. What it's very important to do is to make sure you gain value from this, because of course it's a resource that you're given, and whichever player can utilize that resource better will oftentimes be in a much better position. So this resource can be utilized in a ton of different ways, as it's an incredibly versatile ability. But for example, it can be combined with very high speed plays to gain more cards than your opponent, which is one of the most powerful things that you can do with that, outlined in the clip I just showed you. But you can also use it to clear hazards or units from the board. Check out this clip here where I push round 1 a little bit further than I would normally. It's a situation where I'm actually going to be looking for a pass pretty soon, but I want to develop a little bit of extra value by effectively playing until the opponent plays a weather, so that my pass also gives me the bonus value of clearing that weather. That's another example of something you can do with it. But the final but most reliable way to utilize the resource of giving up the round is to allow yourself to play reactively. Now, being able to play reactive is incredibly powerful in Gwent. When your opponent has to play first and you are allowed to just react to every single thing they do, you really find yourself in the driving seat of the game. So this brings me to my next point, which is a bit of a concept that I'd invite you to try to apply to some of your games. It is what is colloquially known as a dry pass. Now, what a dry pass is when you are in a score state of 0-0, either in round 1 or round 2. If you've won in round 1, you'll be in the state at the start of round 2 typically. It's basically a situation where when the score is 0-0 and it's your turn, specifically you have to go first, what a dry pass is taking an immediate pass in that situation. Now, this seems pretty unorthodox to a lot of players, but what this will do is it basically forces the opponent to play one card to beat you, and then they'll have to go first in the next round. And what you're accomplishing by doing this is basically trading that wild card of the round you're giving up for reactivity. This allows you to play reactively because your opponent will have to go first in the next round, or they can pass and go straight to round 3 if they want to. This is an extremely powerful concept with reactivity, and it's something that you can't necessarily do in every situation. As you develop as a player, you will learn the situations you can't afford to use your wild card in this way. There's definitely some situations, excuse me, where you're going to be looking for a bit more value out of it. But another bonus value of taking an early pass like this, when you do have to go first in a round, is that you're able to force full value out of an opponent's card. Now, this is a bit of a tip with passing, not necessarily linked directly to the dry pass, but one of the things that makes it so good is basically, think about it like this. When you pass, when you're just a few points ahead of your opponent, you are actually getting a more efficient pass because you make them waste points into you, because the typical value of a basic bronze card in Gwent is, let's say, 10 or 11. So when you pass, when you're 9 points ahead, they'll play one card and just beat you by 1 point cleanly without overcommitting to the round. But if you pass when you're just 1 or 2 points ahead, your opponent will often have to play an entire card into you, and they'll overshoot your value, putting too many points into a round that they don't need to distribute points in that way in, and you kind of deny them a good amount of points by doing that. So this is one thing that makes the dry pass a strategy worth trying out. But in addition to that, keep in mind when you're looking for a pass, you want to pass when you're maybe either a couple points ahead or maybe so far ahead that you think your opponent can't beat you in a single card. Beware the kind of middle zone of passing when you're something like 10 points ahead. It's something you do have to do quite often, but you find yourself losing out on value by giving them a very efficient way to overtake you in doing so. If you do try out this unique little strategy, there's just one tip that I would highly recommend. This is a tip that applies whether you're going for the strategy of dry passing or not. This is probably the second most important tip to take away from in this video, and that is every single time you decide, you make a decision, which card you're thinking about playing, consider, when you're considering each card, what will happen if your opponent passes immediately off of that decision. I think this is an extremely great habit to get into with Gwent. It'll really help your understanding of just the fundamentals of the game. For example, every time you make a play, one thing you could do is you could try to block out your opponent's pass. If you're relatively close to them in points, you can try to stay ahead of them at the start of each of your turns, and that makes it a lot harder for them to be able to get a great pass, or at the very least, this tip can really help you make sure you don't accidentally give your opponent too good of a pass by playing in too slow of a situation where you might need to play fast. It's really just about these situations for each. Now, there's a few different ways you can really do this. You can combine this tip with the concept of dry passing and playing reactively by forcing them out of a great pass. Here's an example scenario. Let's say you pass round 1 immediately, and you go straight into round 2. Your opponent may play one card first into round 2, because of course they have to play first when they've won round 1 after you've given it to them. But if you make sure to play a card that's bigger than their card immediately, i.e. staying ahead of their score, by doing this you're forcing them out of the ability to pass without going into round 3 an entire card down, which is a huge deal in Gwent, because of course whoever has the most cards controls the game. And if you continue in this way, making sure to block their pass every turn by staying ahead of their score, you trap them into a round 2 scenario where they have round 1, but you control the entire situation since you have the reactivity of being able to play second into a round you trapped them in. And this will force a huge advantage potential. Now, in round 1, you can try to apply the same strategy, staying ahead to block out the opponent from a pass opportunity, or at least making sure that each play you consider making wouldn't give the opponent too good of a pass. In terms of the objectives I outlined earlier, most notably, letting them lose the round with 2 cards more than you would be pretty disastrous. So, to tie all the concepts that I've illustrated thus far together, and to show you a demonstration of what it looks like when you apply all of them at once, I'm going to go ahead and show a clip of me doing exactly that. So, in this scenario, my opponent is going to go ahead and open with a 9-point play, with the Arrakis being pulled out. And I'm going to go ahead and develop my Yarpen Ziggurat. This is a unit that will stay on the board just once between rounds, and my opponent will then play their Vader Makar, which is of course a low speed setup play because it's a 4-point unit that summons fog. As soon as I see that, I'm going to go ahead and try to play very fast. As we demonstrated before, keep in mind these slow plays that develop these setups can be countered by fast plays setting up a pass, which of course can generate an entire card potentially, but can also go ahead and clear these value over time effects as well, whether they're attached to units or hazards. So I go ahead and counter with Xavier Moran. This is a Squirtle card that boosts itself depending on the strength of the last dwarf I played. This, of course, as a gold card, pulls Roach and buffs my Yarpen by 1 point. This has a total immediate swing of 23 points, which is absolutely massive. That is more than twice the value of an average play with starter decks. So, like Hjalmar, this is one of the highest speed plays you can make with these beginner decks. My opponent will then develop his Dagon, which at this point puts a second fog on the board, threatening a massive 4 points per turn from my side, which is of course very deadly. But because I played such a high speed opening, after seeing not only the slow Arrakis, but especially as soon as the Vader Makar was played, I got a fantastic pass opportunity there, and that's exactly what I took. Now, the most important thing about the situation, as you can see, is not only because of this pass, my opponent is forced 2 cards down, 2 cards less than me in round 2, which is already a fantastic position for me to be in, but I still have my 3 strength Yarpen survived on the board, which is actually preventing my opponent from utilizing the dry pass strategy we outlined earlier, which was their only way to guarantee forcing me to play 1 more card than him to win round 2. I'm gonna stay barely ahead of him with my plays here, no matter what he plays, because I have the reactivity. He has to go first. He's blocked out of the dry pass, and every single time he's gonna go to play a card, I will make sure that what card I play stays just a little bit ahead of him, blocking out his pass entirety. By doing this, I am securing the condition where I am going up not just 1 card more than my opponent, but 2 cards more than my opponent in round 3, which is of course a great situation to be in. Anyway, in summation, the 3 rules, the 3 most major takeaways from this, the most important things. Rule number 1, try to win round 1 at most 1 card down, or lose round 1 2 cards up. Rule number 2, keep a very close eye on the hand card count for both you and your opponent each turn to help you play for this objective. Keep in mind your opponent hand size includes their leader. And rule number 3, every time you think about making a play, consider what happens when your opponent will pass immediately, or rather, if the opponent will pass immediately after you make that play, and make your plays based around that. Try to block out any pass if they have a good opportunity, while simultaneously making sure you don't give them a great one. And that's it. Hopefully, at this point, you've at least learned a little bit about how to really think about the very basic. Again, these are the basic fundamental strategies of Gwent. These are the core concepts that all the other strategies, the archetypes, the deck building concept are really based off of, really built upon, and once you've started to learn these and master these, that's when you can go about developing your own strategies in Gwent. Anyway, thanks for watching, and if you want to learn any more of the advanced strategies in Gwent, you can head over to my Twitch channel, where I can be found at twitch.tv/swimstream, or my YouTube channel, youtube.com/swimstream. I stream every single day at 5 p.m. Central European Time, and I upload 2 YouTube videos a day. And I'll see you guys there. Take care, and happy Gwenting.